He's Perry, and this is
Amy Gaulin.
great. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Amy. We're going to talk about your art and all the stuff behind us here. But first, we thought we'd do a little bit of get to know you, some questions, some games, things like that. So it'll be a fun time. How are you at trivia?
I'm okay at trivia. I do trivia every week with my mom on the phone, so
Nice.
I have a bit of practice.
What sort of trivia do you do with your mom? Like Trivial Pursuit or other games that we aren't endorsing?
Yeah, it's usually Canadian trivia, history, culture, food, those types of topics.
You come up with them yourselves, or you just...
No, we're sent the program, and we study about 60 questions and answers, and then there's a test at the end that my mom does in her with her lodge.
Oh, nice, nice. And is she somewhere else then? Do you do over the phone?
She is somewhere else.
How far away is she?
She's a 6.5-hour drive north of here, north of Edmonton.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Well, it's nice that you can connect with her and do some
Yes.
trivia. So you're going to do great at this. We just thought because we're in Lethbridge and we're in Medicine Hat as well. We thought just to feature the city a bit more. It'd be fun to ask some questions about Lethbridge, and they're very simple. They're really easy. They're multiple choice. So we've come up with a few different trivia questions about Lethbridge. So,
Okay.
Amy, what are people in Lethbridge called? A, Lethbridgites. B, Lethbridgians. Or C, Lethbians. Or D, all of the above.
I'm going to go with D.
You're right, yes. D, all of the above. Lethbians is kind of a colloquial thing, but the first two is the official.
I've heard all of those
right?
being used.
Yeah, it's kind of a thing we call ourselves all the time. Not really. All right, second question. There's only two questions. It's a 2-question quiz. You're passing with flying colors. You're doing great. All right, history kind of question. Lethbridge is home to Canada's first A, irrigation pivot, B, most southern northwest mounted police post, C, publicly funded college, or D, slope mine.
A,
Irrigation pivot?
irrigation pivot.
It was C, publicly funded community college. Yeah, Lethbridge College, now Lethbridge Polytechnic, was the first publicly funded community college in Canada.
Oh, great.
Now you know.
I know.
Yeah. Perry did not know that, apparently. He looked surprised. Those are the trivia questions. You got 50%. Not bad.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Great. All right, we're moving on to the next one. This is called This or That. And that is where we have our lovely, our top hat here, because we are the Windy City's finest. And with this, we just have questions, very simple questions like coffee or tea, or dogs or cats. And then you would respond, I love coffee, or I love tea. And then I would say, yeah, I love tea too. Just kidding, I don't. I love coffee. But it'll be fun. And so it's just a good way to get to know you. So how about you pick the first one?
Fiction or nonfiction?
What do you go? You go ahead first.
Okay,
Fiction or nonfiction?
nonfiction.
And why is that?
I love psychology books, science books, learning about factual things that inspire my artwork. So I tend to stick to the things that are more like textbooks.
What was the last nonfiction book you read?
I'm currently reading Song of the Cell. It's a book about basically what makes up cells, how they, how life works in terms of disease and reproduction and growth at a cellular level. And I don't necessarily understand all of it, but I like being in that microbiology mind space.
Nice, cool. And you're able to kind of help that inform your art, or is it just that one just for fun?
It works into my art. Phrases will come up in that book in particular, like protoplasm is the mother jelly that sustains life. And things like that end up working their way visually into my artwork. Something like that will stick, and I'll want to draw jelly and cells and things that I'm hearing.
Nice. Oh, that's really neat. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I really enjoy nonfiction. I'm kind of the same way. It doesn't necessarily inform my art per se, but I just love learning about various things within nonfiction. Yeah, I think the last book I just finished reading, do you know the Rick Mercer report, or Rick Mercer? Yeah, so I finished reading both his biographies, his autobiographies, and yeah, they were fun. I guess they were memoirs. Really enjoyed that, so.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I liked it. It was a very fun read, so I enjoyed something I like as well, just fun reading too, that's just sometimes comical or well-written, so yeah. Nonfiction. All right, I'm going to pick one. Let's see. Plan ahead or be spontaneous?
Oh, it depends. If I'm doing art, I don't want to plan ahead. I want to be spontaneous. If I'm preparing an art show or something at work, I need to be really planned. Like, I need to have a plan. And so it really, both.
And like just like your like non-work life, just your everyday life, like on a weekend or something, spontaneous, planned.
Spontaneous. Yeah. If I feel like going for a walk, I want to just go for a walk. If something comes up and I decide to go visit with someone, I want to have the freedom and space to do what I feel like.
Nice. Yeah. I would say I'm the same way with my free time for sure. Just more spontaneity is good. Just don't want to have too much of a schedule. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to come along, and
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to be open to it.
Yeah, that's good. Nice. All right, maybe one more, and then we'll move on to Jenga. How about you pick it, Amy.
Dress up or casual? Do you want to go first?
Sure. I would say casual usually, yeah. I'm not much of a dressing up person normally. When I dress up, of course, like anyone, I kind of feel better and it's fun to dress up. But yeah, day to day, usually a little more casual, especially doing non-video podcast stuff. It's just, you don't have to dress up. And for yourself?
Yeah, if I'm making art, casual, because it's messy business. Anywhere else, I like to dress up.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Good stuff. All right. We will move on to our Tumbling Towers game. So this one, as you can see, we have this lovely tower here that may tumble, and it's got different numbers on it, and each number corresponds just to a question that we've come up with here on our little sheet. And they're just open-ended questions like, what's your perfect day like, or whatever it might be. And so we will pull a tile out, and then whatever number that is, we both respond to that question. It's very fun. It's good. You go ahead first, Amy. Have you played Tumbling Towers before?
I have.
Yeah, nice. It's a classic. Ooh.
I'm not off to a good start here.
Yeah, that's an interesting move. We have not had it fall yet.
I might be the first.
You might be the first. Ooh. Oh, my goodness.
5.
Number 5, all right. What was your very first job?
I worked as a babysitter. When I was 11, 12, 13, I babysat for my neighbors, and it was the best experience. I got to go on vacations with them and camping with them all the time, and the girl I was babysitting became like a sister to me, and it was really meaningful and fun. I love playing, so I couldn't believe that was a job, and I just got to be paid for making mud pies in the backyard and doing art with these kids. It was a great first job.
Nice. And how long did you do that for then?
About 3 years.
Cool, yeah. And you said you went on vacation with them? Like anywhere cool?
Yes. Well, that was my first time going to Mexico, so we went to Puerto Vallarta for a couple weeks, and the parents wanted to, go off and explore, and so they brought me along so I could babysit, and they could do their thing, and we could do ours.
Nice.
It was wonderful.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Cool, nice. Have you seen them, like, now that they're more grown up? Or?
No.
You kind of lost
It'd
touch?
be really amazing to see, especially this one girl that I babysat for a few years, but I lost touch. Yeah.
Yeah, that happens. Yeah,
Happens.
yeah. I just remember it wasn't my first job, but I remember when I was younger having that same job. I did not go on vacations, but yeah, babysitting a couple of young boys, and yeah, seeing them when they were, I don't know, 5 or 8 or something. And then one time I just ran to one who was at the college at the Polytechnic, and yeah, he was an adult. I'm like, what happened? You're an adult now. This is it was an interesting experience. Yeah, because I just hadn't seen him since, and
Wow,
he was
that
no
would
longer 8. Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah. Maybe I'll pick a tile next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
It's
Especially with the
Little
microphones. Let's see. Oh, that one feels good, yeah. 13. What is the highlight of your week this week? It's just starting. Yeah, I guess this is your highlight. I won't actually answer for you.
You can answer for me. That's
or last
pretty
week,
accurate.
Yeah. What's been the highlight of your week? A week since today.
Yeah.
Today's a Monday. Yeah.
Today is Monday. I've been able to spend a lot of time in my studio, just getting lost in the flow of art making. That is always a highlight of my days.
Mm-hmm.
But as for things I don't normally get to do, this qualifies as a highlight.
Right. Okay. Yeah. For me, yeah, I guess the past week, I went swing dancing on Friday night. It was very fun. My partner and I, yeah, it was a fun experience. I hadn't really done much swing dancing, so we had a lot of fun swing dancing. Yeah, great. All right, well, let's pull another tile.
Okay. $52.
Okay. 52. If you could live as any animal for a day, what would it be?
A monkey. Oh. Just to be able to run around in the trees and climb on anything and everything and swing around. That just seems so ideal. Mm-hmm. To be in the branches, in the leaves, and nestled into a little spot in the tree. Yeah.
Nice.
That'd be wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I got to see some monkeys in the wild in Costa Rica, and it made my heart jump out of my body. I was so happy. I've always loved monkeys, and there's just some connection there with them.
Cool.
Yeah.
How far away were you? Were you pretty close?
Very close, yeah.
So I've seen some where they're like, on your shoulder or something. It wasn't that close.
Not that close, no.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
I think for me, I would probably be some sort of bird, maybe an eagle or a hawk.
Ooh.
Yeah, they'd be awesome. Like crazy vision, and they can fly, right, over the mountains and stuff. So.
Well, flying would be a really great ability.
Right? Yeah. So that would be my choice for sure. All right. I guess I'm picking another tile. This is great. We're getting through lots of questions. Ooh. 39. If you could live twice as long, what would you do?
All of the art that I don't have time for. I would love to do more fiber art. So weaving and making papers, making fabric sculptures, felting. There are so many art projects that I need to just set aside and agree that I'm not going to be able to dive into them. And that is very sad for me. I'd like to be able to do so many things. And if it wasn't art related, I would be in astronomy. I would love to be in the sciences in some way or another, a biologist or something, just observing the world, seeing what I can learn from plants and animals and the stars and the universe. Yeah, it'd probably be something in the science realm.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. If I could live twice as long, it would be like 100. And I don't know. Yeah, I think for me, what comes to mind is maybe travel. I think, I've done a little bit of traveling, but I think if I had a lot more time, probably travel to maybe every country. Why not?
Do you travel a lot?
A bit. No, probably more, not as much as I'd like to, but yeah, I think I'd want to do more traveling, I think. So, yeah. Do you want to do one more tile?
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, not that one. We'll go right on the top.
Sure.
46.
Technically you can't, but it's fine.
You can't?
Yeah, you have to go three.
okay,
three.
hold
But
on.
we didn't tell you. I thought you played tumbling towers before.
I have, but that's...
Technically, you can't go 3 below. I think you have to start.
Oh.
This is the lowest you can start, or else it's too easy.
Got it.
All right.
17. Let's do 17.
Okay, last one. What is a good habit that you've developed over the years? Could be a personal habit, like just exercise or eating well or whatever. Anything, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. It would be exercise, like going outside into nature when I'm feeling riled up and overwhelmed and stressed. I know that going outside, just walking around in the coulees or in a park, will immediately cut down that tension. And so I'd say, yeah, going outside for a hike, taking a hike when I need it.
That's a good habit.
Yeah.
Very good habit. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any hikes you've been on that are memorable? Any places?
Near Riding on Stone Park, there's an artist that has a residency called Nowhere's Edge. And it's in the Milk River Valley. It's right beside Riding on Stone Park, but it's without all of the people. So you walk in the valley, you walk into the coulees, and you're the only person on the planet when you're there. And those hikes are a little bit spooky, a little bit scary because you're entirely alone. And they're really memorable and amazing. And the amount of awe that you can feel for the scope of nature is incredible in those places.
Nice, absolutely, yeah, nice. And for me, one good habit I've developed is journaling. I do daily journaling.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I think it's been, as of January next year, it'll be 10 years of daily journaling. Yeah, so
Really?
I'm committed.
Do you read them again?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I look back at like what my life was like years ago, or changes or milestones. So yeah, it's a nice way to kind of capture those moments in a different way.
Write every day.
Every single day. It's kind of like my nighttime routine of like before I go to bed, just kind of to just forget about the day and just write it down, or my thoughts or my feelings. So every day, if I miss a day, like, if it's too late, I'll do it in the morning. But 10 years of journaling, yeah.
Oh. Do you always use the same kind of books?
Yeah, same journals. Pretty much same style, kind of a leather-bound journal. And yeah, I find it, and I even thought for a time, I thought, I should like type it up or something, but it's actually that act of like actually writing it is also just part of the enjoyment of it. So
Right.
yeah, I really like journaling.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so I think that's all the time we have for this segment, but it's been fun to play some games with you and get to know you a little bit. This has been the Windy City's Finest on location with Mac and Perry. I'm Mac, he's Perry, and this is...
Amy.
Yeah, so we're going to take a little break.
Hello and welcome once again to the Windy City's Finest, on location with Mac and Perry. I'm Perry, he's Mac, and this is...
Amy.
Amy, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today. And I had a great time watching you play the icebreaker games with Mac. And so I'm super excited to dive into more about your artistic practice and journey so far. And I think I'd like to just start really broad, kind of broad strokes, if you will. And just, what would you say to somebody about your artwork if they had no idea about your artwork?
My artwork is really based on animals, plants, people, and imagining that I'm in the lives of those other beings. So I like to imagine that I'm a bug and crawling around on the ground, and all of the weeds and grasses are ginormous structures. And so I end up drawing a lot of bugs and a lot of things from the perspective of a small critter. I want to share that awe of nature with people, and so that's what I tend to draw a lot of. I like making art about life cycles, what it's like to be living, what it's like to be dying. And so I will use a lot of plants to reference that, thinking about how plants will borrow materials from the earth and grow in one spot and die in the same spot and become materials again for new life. So those are the themes that will oftentimes make their way into my work. And they will often look really dark and moody and soft. They're emotional for me, so they have that emotional charge. And it's usually black and white. It's usually charcoal for the velvety blacks and the rich brights of the paper.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that description. Lots of things are coming to mind for me. And like one of the really specific things that I'd love to kind of dive into a little bit further would just be that idea of scale. Because I'm not sure I had really thought about that before. But yeah, like to a grasshopper, we live in a prairie grasslands. Grasses are like mountains potentially,
like skyscrapers
Yeah.
or trees. If you think about a sheet of moss, that moss is a forest for somebody. For a little microorganism that lives in there, those are giant trees. And even smaller than that, what are those little organisms made up of, and what does that world look like? So when you scale down and when you scale up, you see these patterns that are repeating. Some of the smallest particles or things that we can observe look like galaxies. And those are some of the largest things that we can observe.
Yeah.
And those patterns are repeated at every scale. And it just seems so infinitely large and infinitely small that there's no end to it.
That sounds like a beautiful place to play as an artist. And another thing I really appreciated was that idea of like, there's a difference between sympathy and empathy, but potentially that sense of empathy of trying to step into another's shoes, typically a human, but also animals or other beings, as you called them. So I don't know, that really stood out to me. I don't know if you have more thoughts on that, but.
Yeah, well, that kind of started because of my fear of bugs and not wanting to be around them and not being very kind to them.
Sure.
And thinking, well, I could be a bug, and what would that be like? And so I started really thinking of trying to put myself into a spider's head, or into a mouse's perspective, and what would a mouse think of this huge being, this human, screaming at it and trying to hit it with a broom or something like that. That really changed the perspective for me, and that empathy factor. But even trying to think of what it would be like to be a plant. I read this book by Ed Young. I think it's called An Immense World, and he talks about how different plants and animals, how everything senses the world differently. They have senses that we don't. And it's another study in empathy and recognizing how the experience of everything else in this world.
That's so loaded. I need to sit with it for a second. No, that's awesome. And I love that when we came in here and we were setting up, you mentioned that a spider had like popped out again. And I just love that you brought out your sketchbooks and just, I don't know, were you taking like a quick little sketch or what was that about?
Yes, I did a sketch of it. If you want to see.
Maybe we'll dive into it in the showcase with Mac, but like if you could speak to it briefly.
Yes, we're here in the frame shop that I work in, and a customer had come in, put their project on the counter, and I saw a spider run away, and I saw it using its web to dropped down to the ground, and it was just so beautiful. It had long, elegant legs, and I just thought, I can't capture that right now with my sketchbook. I'm busy, but I hope that I see it again.
Right.
I hope I encounter this spider again. And I did today. I came in and I saw it in a corner, and I had to draw it. It's so elegant and lovely.
Yeah.
And I think I was meant to find it again.
Yeah. No, and I love that so much because I think oftentimes, similar to where it sounds like you started of being afraid of spiders, there are many people that are afraid of spiders. And so I think that that's a wonderful perspective that might inspire some people out there to think differently about those things. So I really appreciate that. And yes, like I said, we are in the frame shop where you work, and the bits behind us are yours. And I know that we'll dive into those probably a bit more with Mac a bit later. But if you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit about the last piece you made, or the last piece you're working on currently.
The last piece I made is a drawing of a fawn, and it's a fawn that I just happened to look out the window into my backyard, and I saw it moments after it was born. And so I've been watching it, observing it while it's been growing up this year, and I feel a connection with that little fawn, and I wanted to honor that experience by drawing it. It's laying in the grass in my backyard. It's gazing into the moon. It's under the apple tree in my backyard, and it's in charcoal, and it just captures that special moment.
Nice. I think there's something in there for me about that idea of potentially the time it takes to capture those, as opposed to just snapping a picture, and I'm just wondering if you could speak to that at all. I'm not sure what I'm asking specifically, but it's that idea of, the time that it takes you to capture that moment or that feeling that isn't just a picture. Like, there's more to it.
There's more to it. Of the lifespan of this fawn so far, it has been a few months. And the feelings that I get every time I encounter it in my backyard and get to watch it, those make its way into the piece as I'm working. Those feelings are what I'm cultivating and what I'm drawing inspiration from. So it's time spent with the subject. It's time spent under my apple tree and sketching what I'm seeing, and then using those sketches from my sketchbooks for the finished, for the final drawing. So it's a multi-level process to come to a final image.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So it's not a picture would just be like one moment in time, whereas this is actually, several moments in time, it sounds like. And
it is. A lot of my artwork feels like collage in that way, where I'll take an element of something I drew last year and then combine it with a memory I had from yesterday, combined with something that came into my imagination today. And so the timing doesn't always make sense for the elements that I've put together into a piece, but it's kind of like collaging a new story together.
I love that. And another thing that you mentioned, I think, in the segment with Mac, was that idea of getting into the flow of working. And I feel like I'm getting a sense of that through what you're saying. And so I'm just curious what you could share with me about that. How do you know when you're in the flow, or is it only afterwards that you're like, oh, I was in it,
when you're in it, but it's hard to determine the moment that it happens.
It started, yeah.
Sounds like a frame fell off the wall.
Oh, okay. Is that something you need to look at now?
No.
Okay.
So you can tell when you're not in the flow, when you start working, and it takes a lot more effort to decide how to begin, what moves you want to make. And then at some point, you kind of drift into the flow where time doesn't exist anymore, and the space around you doesn't exist anymore, and it feels like the process of drawing, for me at least, is out of my control sometimes. And I can sense when that's happening, and I can let it happen. But it's, it's something that I can get into most of the time when I'm working. And that's when the blockades in my brain turn off. That's when it's a more immediate expression. And then at the end of it, I'll look back and think, oh, that was 6 hours. I did not think that I'd spend that much time in that space. But that's what happens. You just go until you get too hungry, or you just need a break, and then realize that you've just been in a different world.
I love that element of out of your control, but like you're doing the things, you are in control. And I love that kind of dichotomy that you're speaking to.
Yeah, you're still in control, but it's like your mind isn't trying to override what you're doing. You're just letting it happen.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm referencing, because I think in our everyday life, I know for myself at least, I can get in the habit of you're thinking about everything as you're doing it, because there's just tasks to do, those classic to-do lists, and so I think that the difference there is that you're potentially those are the blockades, or those are the blocks, and they're kind of like peeling away, and you can just kind of do things without thinking about them all the time.
Yeah, it's a relief. It's a bit of an escape from thinking too much.
And another thing that came to my mind was like, I wonder if that's how bugs feel. Just all the time. They're just living life, and things are flowing by them, and I don't know. That was something I thought about briefly, but
And I've had that thought specifically during COVID. I was working at a public park, and the protocols, the safety was really on my mind, but on my way walking to work, I saw a beetle strolling around in the sand and thought, it has no idea what COVID is. It's just living its life. It's just finding food and enjoying the sun. I don't know what it's actually feeling, but it just seemed in that space and removed from what we get caught up in.
Absolutely. No, wonderful. I think this is a wonderful segue into our next question, and I think we can potentially adapt it a little bit, but it's how have the people in your life impacted your artistic practice? But I'm getting the sense that maybe not even just people, but potentially animals and bugs and stuff. So
yeah, I think it certainly started with people. The first time I was really floored by art was when I saw my mom's sketchbooks when I was a little kid. She had this really surreal way of drawing, kind of like Salvador Dali, where she had these wormy creatures that were curled up inside of a sun with arrows coming out, and that blew my mind. And I thought, what is this? And I tried to copy it and emulate it, and I was so inspired by my mom's surreal vision. And I was also really inspired by my dad's craftsmanship. He built a lot of our furniture. He built our houses. He had impeccable precision and craftsmanship, and I wanted to be like him too. I wanted to build stuff with that kind of precision. And so my parents have both made their way into my art with my mom's surrealism, my dad's craftsmanship. That has really come together. And I have a really creative family. My cousin went to art school, and that's how I realized, I can do this. You can go to school to be an artist. This is amazing. And so I think having a really creative family was really informative for me and inspiring. And so it did start out with people, but I did also spend a lot of time walking around alone in nature, looking down at the ground, looking at the rocks and grasslands of Southern Alberta. And just letting my imagination soar that way too.
No, I love that. That your parents' influence has kind of made its way into your practice. So you mentioned that your mom's sketchbooks. Was your mom an artist?
She was an artist at heart.
Yeah, at heart.
She didn't pursue it per se, but she always was doing creative things, making jewelry, making willow furniture.
Wow.
She had sketchbooks that she had when she was younger that I have now, and I look through them, and it's so wonderful. So she would have loved to pursue being an artist, and I think my dad would have too. He's very creative.
Can you tell me a bit about what that means for you to be an artist and pursuing your creative pull? That's the wrong words, but I think you know what I'm going for.
I just feel so grateful that I have the ability to do this, that I have the resources to follow my passion, because it's so fulfilling for the soul, and I can't imagine not doing it. It really gives me a voice, and where I feel like I don't have one, and it helps me figure out who I am. I learn who I am authentically through art, through my sketchbooks, and reflecting on things I draw. I really learn about myself. And so the idea of expressing the human experience and self-expression is so important to me. And so I'm just really grateful that I'm able to spend so much of my time in that realm.
I really appreciate that, because I think that, I think one thing that did come out of, COVID and the pandemic was that idea of people potentially having time to reflect and realize, maybe what they were doing that wasn't aligning with their values, or just realizing what their values are. And so I would be curious to hear more of your thoughts and experiences on what it means to take time to reflect on, your artwork or just your life in general.
I think it's so important. It's part of being mindful. And mindfulness, I think, helps a general sense of having more love and connectedness. So if you are reflecting on yourself, if you're journaling like Mac does, and getting your thoughts out, you're making space for new thoughts. You're allowing yourself to reflect on, what am I thinking, and do I want to keep those opinions or thoughts? Can I grow from here? So it's really a growth tool, and in growing yourself, your relationships get easier and less chaotic and less stressful, and then your work it just makes everything easier when you've been mindful for a while, and when you've reflected for a while, and when you've grown and made changes that get you out of your blocks, and it helps you get unstuck from things that aren't working.
Yeah, I really appreciate that idea that, it's not necessarily a quick fix thing either. The whole instant gratification idea, and that it's not that. It does take time, and it is an investment in yourself, it sounds like, right? And
it's not a linear progression where it just gets better and better. It's
right.
Very much waves, and there are always those crashes and high points. And so to expect that just mindful practices will set you on a trajectory that's like this is unrealistic.
Right.
And it does take years, and it's constant. You can't run out of things to reflect on and to be mindful of, and you can't run out of ways to grow. So it is a lifelong pursuit.
Yeah. And do you feel like that's always been there for you? Like, is that something you feel like potentially your parents have instilled, whether intentionally or not? Or is that something you found a bit later in life?
I found that a bit later in life. I've been really working on that aspect for about 10 years, but really for the last 5. I've made a effort to really pay attention and write down all the negative stuff that comes into my head and then analyze it and analyze what I'm saying to people and if it's helpful or if it's making the world a better place, and if it's not, then how else can I say something, or how can I recognize what my needs are so that I'm not establishing my boundaries, and so that I'm not expecting too much from other people. It's just there's a lot of work to do, but it has been something that I've come to a bit later because I was just feeling so stuck. And I knew I was getting stuck in my head, and I wanted a way out, a different way of thinking, a different way of being.
No, I really appreciate that. There's like I forget where I heard it or where I saw it, but it's that idea of instead of waiting until you have what you need to become the person that does the thing, it's like, it was just such a simple thing of flipping that, and it's like, be the person that takes the time to reflect, and then you will through doing the thing, you'll become that ideal version of yourself, or not that there is ever we're ever finished in that pursuit, but I think that's like the sense that I'm getting a little bit, is that just putting that foot forward and doing the thing, taking the time to reflect, or carving out the time to work on your practice, so very cool. Let's move on. Let's pivot, because I'm sure we could talk about that for ages. I'm really curious about the introduction of charcoal into your work. Has that always been there, or is that something you found a little bit later?
The only thing I really focused on up until art school was graphite, just pencil drawing. I was introduced to charcoal when I was in art school.
Right on.
I had a teacher that tore apart everything I knew and made me rebuild from the ground up. And that teacher had the whole class put up big pieces of paper on the wall, gave us a stick of charcoal, made us cover the whole paper in black, and work it in with our hands, and then start erasing images out of it. And we were covered in charcoal dust, and it was such a messy thing. But at the end of it, I felt really connected to that process of discovering an object or a form in the drawing and pulling out the light and kind of drawing backwards. And also the type of paper and charcoal that we were using made for really flexible art material, because you can make the paper as black as you can and then erase it entirely back to the white of the paper and then make it really black. And then the more that you go back and forth between light and dark, the more saturated the paper becomes, the more depth the image has, the more it feels like it's shimmering, and the more life it has. It felt really alive. And I remember that initial excitement of drawing the inside of my freezer. That was our project. Draw a dark room.
Oh, interesting.
So I drew my freezer because it didn't have a light in it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe the amount of depth that it had from drawing, erasing. I think I redrew 7 times over the same image. And it had the softest edges. And it had this illumination that was coming from it, and I was hooked on charcoal from then on.
Yeah, no, and I think I've talked to you about this before, but I really love that idea of not starting from a blank canvas. So it's actually you get something on there first, and then you're kind of like, is it negative space? Like you're actually creating negative space as opposed to trying to fill space. I'm probably not articulating it very well. Do you know what I mean?
Maybe.
Yeah.
It's when you're starting with a tone or a ground, there's a lot more push and pull, and the negative space and the object become more related.
Right.
So you don't have such a sharp differentiation between an object that's on there and then the negative space behind it. It's more melded.
Nice. There's more thoughts there, but I'm gonna let them simmer for a second.
Okay.
What have been some of the reactions to your artwork? Can you speak to any special moments that you've had? People commenting on your art, positive reactions, negative reactions, which are also valid? Yeah.
The most positive and negative reactions I've had to my work have both been from my mom.
Oh, interesting.
I did a collaborative painting with somebody else, and when my mom saw that in a gallery, she bawled. And then we decided to give her the painting, so we brought it to her house, we hung it, and then she cried for an hour straight and said, "This painting fills something in my heart that was missing, and it filled me up so much it poured out of my eyes."
Wow.
Yeah. But she's also had the opposite reaction to work that I've also other collaborations with other painters, where she has said, "It is so dark, it's black, it's like a gas chamber, it's like terrible," and she just can't see any beauty in it. It's just so dark that she hates it. And I love that she has that spectrum of responses
Totally.
to my work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do get a lot of emotional responses. If I'm doing realistic portraiture and commissions for people where they want a drawing of a loved one that maybe has passed away, I love drawing people's family portraits and capturing the life in somebody's eyes and giving that to someone is a really emotional experience.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just make art that's more dreamlike and fun, and people say, "That feels like it came straight out of my head." That's what I dream about. That's my nightmares. That's like, these are thoughts that don't, like visuals that don't really make sense, but it feels like you're in my head.
And how does that make you feel?
That makes me feel like I'm on the right track, because that's the type of art that I really respond to.
Right.
The art that I love is art that feels like it was in my head, and art that really moves me. Or provides me with a safe place to have difficult emotions.
A safe place to have difficult emotions. That's interesting, because as a theater artist, creating a safe place to explore a play that maybe deals with like really difficult things. And so I'm curious about that idea of creating a safe place within a piece of art. I'm just curious if you could speak more to that.
Yeah. I'll speak to it with someone else's painting
Sure.
where I had this experience.
Absolutely.
There's a friend of mine, John Ross, who painted a deer that was dead, and its eye was open, and there was a bit of a glimmer of light in its eye, and there was a plant growing out of its body. And it was in this beautiful landscape with a little set of stairs leading up to it. It was like it was in a fairy tale world, and I stood in front of it and I cried, because as I was looking into it, I could feel like I could experience grief of people in my life dying. And I knew that it was a safe place to feel that because it also showed me the beauty that comes out of death. And that new life comes out of death. And that everything is a duality. The sadness and heaviness of death can be paired with the peace and light of love. And you can look away from the painting if you don't want to feel it. But if you do want to feel that and release something, then that's what that painting is there for.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I don't know how to articulate my thoughts. No, that is really beautiful. And I really appreciate you sharing that, yeah, that's your experience with somebody else's art. And would you say that that's something that you try and offer in some way, shape, or form to people viewing your art?
I do. And I have. Sometimes when I'm making art, I start with an emotion that is really heavy and dark in my body, and I get that out in charcoal on the paper, and it feels dark and heavy on the paper. But then as I'm working the picture, I'm trying to find a balance and incorporate light into it and kind of get to this 50-50 balance of there's darkness here, but there's also lightness here, and you can go back and forth. And I've seen people react really strongly to that work of mine, where they say, I don't know what I'm feeling, but this is making me want to cry. This is making me want to open up about something or release something or feel something. And so I do aim for that sometimes. And it's that process for me as I'm making the drawings. It's... I get to release something that's dark. I get to spend time in that place, get it out of my body, and then I get to find the peace in it and come around and come full circle with it and learn from it. And I feel like that energy is felt by other people because I've put that energy into the piece.
I love that. And it's reminding me of the idea of cycles, right? Life cycles and the cycle of creating a piece. And how that maybe is conveyed to people. And there was another thought in there that has to do with the idea of, starting with something dark and potentially, that's something that other people might be feeling just in life and getting stuck in. And the idea of getting unstuck through trying to, add light or find light and find the beauty or the opposite, the duality of those heavy things, for sure. And so that's just something I heard that I wanted to identify because I figure maybe it will help somebody. If you're feeling stuck in something really heavy, it's like maybe there's a way or maybe there's a piece of art that can help you, unclog that thing that can help you move forward. So awesome.
Yeah. There was a moment where I ran into someone spontaneously in a park, and we had a really meaningful conversation, and at the end I'd asked him, well, how do you get rid of darkness? Like, what do you do with it? And he said, well, what happens to the darkness in a room when you turn on a light? And it's so simple, and it's oversimplified maybe, but just the power of light to make darkness a little less heavy. It's powerful.
Yeah. I love it. I think I'm going to leave that there for now. Again, I feel like I could talk about it for ages. But I think our last question for you here would just be, how has your artistic practice changed you?
It has changed me in every way of being. I see the world so much differently from being an artist. I notice way more because I'm studying how would I draw that, and just from observing the world and studying it, I'm learning so much just by listening. I'm noticing moments that I wouldn't if I wasn't interested in documenting what I'm seeing and what my experience is. I notice a lot more awe and beauty, and I notice a lot more in nature, and I think it's because I'm just thinking about drawing and thinking about what do I want to capture, what's catching my attention, what's important, and then it's helping me figure out myself and what I like and how I want to be. And so I think the biggest change is that the way I'm seeing the world, the patterns I notice, the details I notice, all the beauty there is to notice.
No, I love that. I think like the word that kept coming out there is like what you notice. And I also get that sense of we don't have to do it all ourselves. It sounds like you're leaning on the world around you to help you figure out the thing that we're all doing, which is living, And so I really appreciate that idea of leaning on the world around you to help you through it.
Exactly. It's that interconnectedness, learning or knowing that you aren't alone, that you are connected, you are connected with everything around you. Yeah.
Nice. I think that's a beautiful note to end off on. So, I think that is all the time we have for this segment. So thank you so much for talking with me. Thank you so much for tuning into the live stream or on YouTube or otherwise. This has been the Windy City's Finest on location with Mac and Perry. I'm Perry.
Welcome to Windy City's Finest on location with Mac and Perry. I'm Mac, he's Perry, and this is
Amy.
Well, Amy, so we've been talking about, we got to know you a bit in the first segment when we talked about kind of your artistic practice. And for this, we call it like the showcase, and it's time to kind of show your art and talk about it, and it'll be fun. So we've picked a few pieces out that we could show you, and I think I'm going to start with this one, if that's all right with you. I'm just going to set it here. What is the name of this piece? Does it have a name?
It's called Other Side. And this is one of the pieces I started without a plan. It started with the frame. So working at a frame shop, there are often frames that we've built to the wrong size or they've come in at the wrong size, and I fall in love with them and I decide I'm going to make an art piece for that. So for this one, I just started getting charcoal on the paper and waited to see what would emerge. And what started happening was these little nests started coming out. So I wanted to put an egg in one and another creature of some sort in another. I don't know what kind of creature that is. And added a bit of a vortex between them. Where the light of this egg could come through and dazzle this creature. And I don't know what the intent is of this creature. I don't really know what's happening in this one. Sometimes the art just kind of happens and I don't know what it's about. And this is one of those pieces where I don't know what it's about.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of told me like, well, just pick some pieces that stand out to you, and it stood out to me when I saw it. It has this very like otherworldly feel that I enjoy. I'm very kind of supernatural or science fiction-y kind of is the way I felt about it.
It does have those elements because that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the power of new life, which is the egg. Something's growing in there. It's emanating this light, this power, and this thing senses it. And it's cozy, it's safe, it's kind of surrounded by a tree. It's I don't think it's threatened, but the vortexes and odd spaces like that are very science fiction, and it's more the feeling of that I'm going for when I'm drawing.
Yeah, and I like, I'm by no means an artist, but, the balance of this, like, you've got the light on either side, you've got kind of this darkness in the middle. It's a really nice balanced piece. And then I'm seeing, like, some, like foliage down there. What is that?
Yeah, it's more about balance as well. If this egg gets to be underneath a weeping willow, then this creature gets to have some foliage, some nature for comfort as well. I feel like if there's a bit of nature in a space, it feels safer. Because that was the last element I had added to the piece. It was a little bare and cold and not grounded. And adding a bit of foliage made it feel like a part of the same landscape, but also a bit safe and comforting.
Yeah, no, I really like it. And so you said this, like, started with the frame. This came into this frame shop here. I guess, like, what's that process like? Is it like, do you look at the shape of it? Is it the texture? What kind of informs what ends up on here?
It is the shape, and this is such an odd shape, and it felt like it really wanted to be a landscape. The texture and color to me adds feeling. This felt like tree bark or something really natural, something light. I wanted light in the piece because this felt light. So whenever I start with the frame really does inform what the drawing becomes.
And, like, do you start a lot of these pieces with the frame?
I
or?
do.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah, because at the frame shop we have a lot of excess material. After we build a frame for a customer, we'll have some length left over. And if they're smaller pieces, they'll be turned into an octagon frame or turned into whatever size frame we can make out of it. And then there's just already so much personality in those frames that it's fun to pick up the feeling of it and then have that as a starting point for jumping into the artwork. So it's really a response to the frame.
Okay, so you see a bunch of frames, the leftover ones, and you go, this one speaks to me, and then...
They mostly all do.
Okay, yeah.
But for different reasons. Some of them feel really like a celebration. Some of them feel really quiet. Some of them feel dark and moody. And so they all have different personalities, and they all make different personalities of drawings.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because I guess, when I think of just, again, I don't draw as an art. It seems like the framing is like the last step. So it's really interesting that that's like the first thing that you're starting with.
Yeah, sometimes it is the last step, but since I work at a frame shop, it has become the first step most of the time.
And do you, like, this is really part of your art, but I'm just curious with the framing side of things, like, if someone comes in, maybe a newer artist, like, do you ever talk about that with them, about, like, starting with the frame? Is that maybe a new idea for them? I don't know.
Right, I've shared that with a couple people, but it hasn't seemed to really stick yet, and there haven't been that many people that are interested in buying a frame that's already made and then making something to fit with it that I've encountered yet. I feel like it can catch on, and I'm going to keep letting people know of that possibility and how fun it is to be inspired by the frame.
Yeah. Or the opposite, just don't tell anyone. We're cutting this section out. It's now your proprietary thing. It's part of your practice.
I would love to see what other people would do with frames. I'd love for people to come in and say, I want to be inspired by a frame. I want to make a piece that fits in it. What do you have? That would make my day.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, I think we're going to look at another piece here. Sure, yeah. Harry wants to take this away. Thank you very much, my assistant. Let's just do this one next year. All right. Yeah, again, this one, looking at it just on the wall, really kind of like, oh, that looks different. It definitely stood out to me. So tell me about this piece, Amy.
This is a piece that I had the paper. I was trying to do a bunch of different drawings that weren't working. I got frustrated and made the paper entirely black and just started rubbing the charcoal around, seeing if I could see any shapes emerging in it. And I was looking outside my studio window and saw a rhubarb leaf and thought, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I'll try to put a bit of a rhubarb leaf here. And then I started seeing the shape of maybe a hill. So I started erasing lightness around it and just responding to whatever shapes my hands had made on the paper and the charcoal had made as I was putting it down. And then a bird thing emerged, and the rhubarb leaf became a tree, and the bird became this creature climbing a hill. And I thought, it's looking very curious. What is it looking at? And so there was this tree form here that was emerging, and I thought, well, if there's a little hole in that tree that goes into a space underneath the tree, what kind of creature could be down there? And in another drawing I had done, this worm wearing a helmet had emerged, and I thought, that's a great character to put under this tree in a little hidey hole that he knows that the bird is up there. The bird's curious about what's under here, and what kind of a relationship do those two characters have together. And so a story came out of it, but it started as a black piece of paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's very striking. I really like it, yeah. And like a piece like this, like how long would this take you to make?
If it's from imagination, it's way quicker than if I'm drawing something realistically from a photo reference. So this would have been maybe 3 days of 3 full days of working on it, taking breaks, stepping back, looking for shapes, looking for story, and going back in and working it, and then refining the details. These are, drawings from imagination are relatively quick.
Okay, yeah. And it seems like the way you were describing it is kind of like coming out of your imagination, right? Like you're discovering these creatures and what they could be.
It is, and sometimes I'll use creatures that I've created before, and sometimes, I tend to find birds in a lot of shapes. In my sketchbooks, they're kind of full of birds. Sometimes I'll just doodle mindlessly, and then I'll see birds in them. So I think that's sort of what happened here. I have a tendency to see birds because someone else had seen this at a very beginning stage, and they said, I see a whale. And I thought, well, I see a bird, so I'm going to go with a bird. And so I think my mind is kind of geared towards certain animals and looks for certain shapes and things that I'm familiar with.
No, it's interesting, again, not knowing much about the drawing world, but so you had someone like look at an early draft of this and actually give feedback? Is that a common thing? Or
if there's another artist around visiting, I certainly like for them to take a look and to talk about it and to ask, what do you see, especially if something's not really clear to me yet. Because even when something like this is really clear to me and I've uncovered it, different people look at it and they see something entirely different. And I love that, that different people have interpretations, they have different ways of seeing things, and I'm really curious about what people see.
No, that's great, yeah, because I feel like, again, if I'm making assumptions about some art, like you don't want to share it too early, you want to, wait till it's done, it's not ready, your novel isn't ready or something. So I appreciate that you let other people see the art before it's done.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to do because a lot of pieces go through more of an ugly stage where you don't really want people to see it because it's a bit embarrassing. But that's also a humbling time to let somebody see it too and say, well, this is my ability level, this is what it is, and just be vulnerable in that moment and be honest about it. So I always feel like it's valuable for people to see the process, and I like sharing that.
Oh, that's good, yeah. And that makes me think of something else, like when you were talking with Perry, you mentioned like collaborating on pieces with artists. And again, not knowing much about this world, like what is that like? Like what is that like to collaborate? How does that actually work to collaborate with another artist on a piece?
It's different for different artists. There's someone that I collaborate with regularly where we will work on the same piece. We'll make some big moves, lay down a bunch of paint, and then step back from it and just look at it and talk about it for quite a while before deciding what the next step is. Then we'll agree on a step, mix up paint together and lay it down together, and then maybe go back in and destroy it. But there's a lot of sitting back and talking through it with each other, what we're seeing, what isn't working, how we might solve this problem. And you end up solving problems much differently than when you're working alone, because maybe they've discovered a different way of working with the material than that you haven't tried, or your skills tend to really come together and help each other shine. And sometimes when I'm working with other artists, it's more like, okay, you have this spot, I have this spot, let's start there, but then we'll force each other to move around constantly so that you're always working on top of each other's spaces and you're not getting too precious about any one particular area, and it doesn't feel like separate artists have made it. It's more of just a combination of skills, and then something comes out of it that you wouldn't have been able to make on your own. And just watching somebody else work and how they handle paint or how they handle charcoal is such a learning experience. You get to just see techniques that someone else is using or see things in their eyes. Yeah, it's a fascinating process to collaborate. I love it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's something I wasn't aware of that charcoal artists do. So yeah, that's really neat. Because yeah, it does feel like a very personal thing, any kind of, a solo artistic expression. So it's interesting that you could collaborate on something like that. Yeah. Yeah, great. Well, this is getting heavy. So I have Perry take this one away. Let's get a smaller one. All right, let's check out this piece. An octagonal one. I bet you this is a frame that you... look, I can just set this one on here. That's perfect. Hopefully the angle is okay. I'm just going to rotate it a bit. Is it okay? Great. Lovely. Amy, tell me about this piece.
This is a piece that started with the frame. And so when it's an octagon or a circle, I feel like it's a looking glass. And I often want to put bugs in it, or a creature, or something that you feel like you can really dissect just by looking at it. And so I chose this grasshopper. This grasshopper I saw when I was in Costa Rica, and it was the size of my hand. It was really large, and it was propped up on my flip-flop, and it was eating the foam around the edges, and I was astounded. I couldn't believe that it wanted to eat my shoe, but it was posed perfectly, and so I got down with my camera and I took a picture because I didn't think I'd be able to sketch it quick enough before it moved. And I came back with that picture and I drew it, and I started drawing it on this, flip-flop shape, but I didn't want it to be that. I wanted it to be a little otherworldly. And at the time when I was drawing this, I had accidentally damaged somebody's artwork because I burnt it with an iron. So I made a burn mark in my own drawing to remind myself of being careful with other people's really important things. And I mean, mistakes happen, but I wanted to make sure I was accountable and put a little burn mark with charcoal in my own piece to remember that. And I wanted this grasshopper to be looking at something. I wasn't sure what, but I was listening to a book or a podcast, and the person was talking about complexity theory and talking about quantum foam and how kind of at the smallest elements of our world we're made up of this quantum foam. And so I had these bubbles in mind, these different particles. It's kind of like a galaxy, it's kind of like a cell, it's kind of like quantum foam, it's kind of like a mirror. And this grasshopper is just mesmerized by whatever's happening here. And so it kind of feels like a bit of a black hole, but also this light. So it's balancing on either side of it.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I love how you're incorporating your interest in science into your pieces, and yeah, it's really neat. I like this piece. And my favorite part is it stands on its own, so I don't have to hold it up. Yeah, I think just because we mentioned it, I know we're running short on time, but because you mentioned like your notebook and the spider in an earlier segment, I kind of just want to see it. I want to see the drawing of the spider that you had been making. So if it's not too much trouble, if we could quickly pull that out.
It isn't.
Yeah, is it here?
It's in this one.
Yeah, perfect.
A big part of my practice is sketchbooking. And that is where I get a lot of my inspiration. I sketchbook what I see.
Okay, so this is the spider that you saw in the studio here?
Yes.
Nice. Lovely. And then he's in the ocean, it looks like. What's going on there?
And underneath the apple tree in my backyard that the fawn is under in one of my drawings.
So this isn't necessarily these aren't connected at all, it's just you had space? And so
They're not connected. This is kind of just me observing what I'm seeing, putting it together wherever it feels right, and then seeing if it creates its own story, or this is something just from imagination. It's just a doodle, and this is an observation from my backyard, and this is a spider from today. But putting them together makes you think, well, maybe there's a story here. And that's how I like building images.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing. I just really, really wanted to see that because we talked about it. So, I'll just give that back to you. Lovely. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you showing me these pieces. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I've learned a lot. So, thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this has been the Windy City's Finest on location with Mac and Perry. I'm Mac. He's Perry, and